There's a CD-ROM packed away in a box in my closet that I haven't looked at in almost 30 years. I created it when I was a student at Sheridan College as my final project for their computer graphics program. It's a little interactive game based on The Odyssey, and nobody has seen it since. Now, with The Odyssey back in theaters thanks to Christopher Nolan's new film, I thought this would be the perfect time to dig it out and see what I actually made all those years ago. So let's go back to 1998 and take a look. The most important piece of software I used to create this project was Macromedia Director. Director was one of the big names in interactive media authoring. It was used for everything from educational software and CD-ROM games to interactive content on the web through Shockwave. CD-ROMs were a big deal at the time because they allowed you to combine graphics, animation, sound, video, and interactivity all in one package. Director brought all of those elements together, and its programming language, Lingo, allowed you to control how they behaved. That's what I was learning to use when I made this game, while creating artwork in Photoshop, building 3D environments in Bryce and Strata Studio Pro, and creating and finding sound effects. And I think you'll get a pretty good idea of all of that just by seeing the game. The game opens with a map of the Mediterranean, which acts as the central hub for the entire experience. After 10 years of war, Odysseus is finally trying to make his way home to Ithaca. You simply click and drag his ship around the map to visit the different locations. I wanted the whole thing to have an illustrated storybook quality, so I created the map and all of the borders around the screens in Photoshop. The borders were designed to look like the wood of Odysseus' ship, with a Greek-style pattern and different colored trim for each section. The game lets you visit the 5 locations in any order, but we're going to head to the Cyclops first. I broke the story into 3 separate scenes: Polyphemus trapping the men in the cave, the blinding of the Cyclops, and the eventual escape underneath the goats. The gameplay is basically a series of multiple-choice questions, but I used those questions to move the story forward. First, Odysseus offers Polyphemus some wine, and the Cyclops quickly overindulges. Realizing that Polyphemus is the only one strong enough to move the massive boulder blocking the cave, Odysseus blinds him instead of killing him. Finally, the men escape by hiding beneath the Cyclops' goats as he leads them out to graze. And of course, Odysseus can't resist taunting the Cyclops as they get away. If anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus, which is probably not the smartest thing he could have done. Next, we're off to the island of Aeolus, Keeper of the Winds, who may finally have a way to help Odysseus reach home. This is a simple matching game, but I used it as an opportunity to pack in a lot of information about Greek mythology and the Trojan War. Each pair of symbols reveals another piece of information, including Achilles' armor, the golden apple, Ajax, the Trojan horse, Achilles' heel, and the bow and arrows of Heracles. I wanted the game to be more than just a series of puzzles. I wanted someone who didn't know the story to actually learn something while playing it, and that's why there's so much written material throughout the game. And then, we finally meet Aeolus. He's basically a giant floating disembodied head. It's a little over the top, but I remember thinking that it was a pretty fun reveal. After Aeolus gives Odysseus a bag containing all of the destructive winds that would hinder his journey, the crew gets close to home. Odysseus falls asleep, and one of his men opens the bag. All of the winds escape, and the ship is blown right back to Aeolus. So much for the shortcut home. Next, we're heading to the island of Circe, the powerful sorceress who has transformed Odysseus' men into pigs. Those are sounds I created myself. Yes, I made pig noises for my video game. I'm not entirely sure what that says about me. Hermes gives Odysseus a magical herb called moly that can break her spell. So the challenge is to click on the pigs in the correct sequence and turn them back into men. I also changed the mouse cursor when Odysseus receives the sprig of moly. The cursor actually becomes the little magical plant. It's a small feature, but I thought it was a really nice touch. With her spell finally broken, Circe sends Odysseus on his way, but not before warning him that even greater dangers await. Next, we're heading to the Isle of the Sirens, where Odysseus and his crew have to find a way to resist the deadly song of these mysterious creatures. I had a lot of fun drawing these characters. I wanted them to be attractive, but also a little bit monstrous, so they have feathers, claws, bird-like feet, and pointed ears. The gameplay here is very simple. You have to figure out which objects will help Odysseus and his crew escape the sirens. When you choose the right objects, you get pleasant sounds from the sirens. When you choose the wrong ones, you get some much less pleasant noises. And then, when the boat finally escapes, we get some music. That's The Prophecy by Iron Maiden. Apparently, 1998 Andy decided that Iron Maiden was an appropriate soundtrack for The Odyssey. And honestly, I don't hate it. Then we get to the island of Calypso, where Odysseus has been held captive for years and is desperate to continue his journey home. This is one of my favorite screens because I remember this puzzle actually being a bit of a programming challenge. You have to rotate the 4 sections of this mosaic until they line up. I had to write the lingo code to keep track of the different positions and recognize when the puzzle had been solved. And then you get this reveal of Hermes. I originally drew him in the same comic book style as the other characters, but I wanted him to look more like a classical Greek artwork here, so I used Photoshop's mosaic filter to completely change his appearance. Eventually, after completing all 5 challenges, Odysseus finally makes it home. And this is where you can see that I had definitely run out of time. It's basically one final illustration of Odysseus arriving home, followed by some text explaining what happened while he was away. And that's it. No final puzzle, no big animated finale, just we're home. I think by this point I had put most of my time into the 5 challenges, and I simply had to finish the project. And that's actually one of the things that I find interesting about looking at this now. You can see the compromises. And finally, we reach the credits screen. I had spent some time creating this illustration of Poseidon, but never found a natural place to include him in the gameplay, even though he's an important antagonist in the Odyssey. I didn't want the artwork to go unused, so I thought the credits screen was the perfect place to give him an appearance. But here's the part of the game that I really wanted to show you. Every character in this game started as a hand-drawn illustration. I would draw the characters on paper, scan them into the computer, and then color them in Photoshop, and I still have all of those original drawings. So we can actually see the process from the original drawing to the Photoshop coloring, and finally to the finished character inside the game. The environments were created differently. I used Bryce 3D to create the landscapes, the sea, beaches, and mountains, and I used Strata Studio Pro to build 3D objects like Odysseus' boat. I would render those elements, bring them into Photoshop, and then manipulate them into the artwork I needed for Director. And then there's one last part of the story that I didn't realize would become so important when I made this. Sheridan held an open house where local companies could come in and see what the students had created. A local software developer saw my project and specifically hired me because they wanted to create a CD-ROM based on the trials of Heracles, another Greek myth. I was hired by the company, but we never actually ended up developing the Heracles software. They did give me this book, though, which they wanted me to use as a reference for the project, and I still have it to this day. So this simple game that I made as a college project ended up helping me get my first job in the multimedia industry, and that makes this CD-ROM a lot more meaningful to me now than it did when I first made it. I had no idea where any of this would lead, but looking at it now, I can see the beginnings of so many things I would go on to do professionally: art, design, animation, sound, programming, and storytelling. It started as a college project, but it became the beginning of a lot more. I'm curious, is there something you made in school or early in your career that you still think about? Maybe an old project that has taken on new meaning with time? If so, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks for coming back to 1998 with me, and I'll see you in the next video.